So, 1,000 subscribers. Apologies for the voice. I wanted to get this out sooner, but I got quite sick yesterday. Very, very sore throat. Nothing really worked, so I couldn't pull myself together enough to thank you all for what you've helped me accomplish. I really cannot put into words what you actually did by listening to a nut job speaking to himself on YouTube about things that most people don't care about, or in some cases about things that most people don't even know exist. So a great cheers to all of you, and here's hoping that we don't stop growing here, because we've done a lot and we've grown a lot since my earliest two videos about those Proxon machine tools. We've played with liquid nitrogen, we've played with very interesting, in my opinion, test gear, we've repaired stuff, we've even done a project together, and I'm grateful that I had you all along for the ride. And in traditional fashion, I have no idea what to do this video about. I will try and keep it a bit shorter, and I have a few things that I could show you. They're flea market finds, but I'm not gonna title this video Flea Market Finds something, because they're also some of my favorite things that I use to do this for you guys, and things that I think might help some of you out if you're also trying to get into electronics. Don't worry, we won't talk too much about Keithley's, and because yeah, Keithley is my number one test equipment manufacturer after HP. So basically, I'm a Keithley and HP guy. Let me first tell you a few things about me, so if you're not interested, you can skip ahead a few minutes. And let me put a name to the voice. My name is Alex. I'm about 27. I'm an electrical engineer by education. I've always worked in electronics though, and I've just started a master's program in, so I've joined a master's program in advanced microelectronics. So soon I'll be able to, I'll learn about how to design silicon, how to do all sorts of interesting things related to integrated circuits, basically. I always loved electronics since I was very young. I remember building those 2-3 transistor radio bugs and radio receivers and stuff like that on proto boards, and burning out LEDs and taking the things apart before I could properly, walk and talk. And yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And my dad was an engineer as well. He's a mechanical engineer, but still the technical side of things got into me, and I just couldn't escape the bug. Once you caught it, you got it for life. It's like, it's not a disease, but you know what I mean. It's a bug. And there's a lot of people on YouTube that I would like to thank for their work, and for some of them even for personally convincing me to start doing this. And yeah, so I'm very, very thankful. I never thought we'd get over 1,000 subscribers. The fact that there's 1,000 people who've decided that my content is worth their time and effort is amazing, and it makes me feel very rewarded that actually I'm not talking by myself, I'm actually talking to you guys. And I hope you'll keep watching my videos, and you'll keep interacting. I read all your comments, and I love how supportive you people are. You're wonderful. I always believe that the electronics community on the internet is the best one there is. It's the least toxic, it's by far filled with the smartest people, the most clever individuals, and the sky is the limit for this community, basically. So again, cheers. Here's to the next 1,000 subscribers, and hopefully we'll get further than that. So absolutely no particular order. One of my most favorite things ever is this Pace ADS 200 soldering iron. It's turned off, that's why it's not sizzling. I remember one of the first jokes I did with a colleague of mine from my new job. I saw him, he was actually working on something, trying to solder something, and I told him, you know, you're supposed to grab the tip of the soldering iron, which doesn't make your fingers sizzle. So this is, I think, the best soldering iron there has ever been. This video is not sponsored by Pace or anybody. This is just my personal opinion. I've worked with Wellers, I've worked with Ursas, I've worked with everything under the moon and under the sun, and this has proved by far the most reliable, robust, rugged, powerful, controlled soldering iron that I've ever had. And the tips last for eternity. This particular tip is new, but the previous one, which was still a 5mm chisel, it lasted for almost 5 years. So 5 years of daily soldering, leaded, non-leaded alloys, everything. It was absolutely indestructible. And for the price, like 15 bucks for one of these tips, it's just amazing. They really got a winner in this thing. If you get one, get it with the instant setback option, because otherwise it will keep running at whatever temperature you set it, and it will drastically shorten the life of the iron. And you can see the tips are really good. They don't oxidize. They're nice and shiny all the time. The only thing I don't like about the soldering station is the design of the brass sponge holder. It's kind of stupid, and this is the original sponge. It's starting to break down and it needs replacement, but yeah, hard to find any gripes with the thing. Okay, so that was one of the first of my favorite things. My second favorite thing is this yellow beast, the Fluke 87.5. I think everybody knows about this multimeter. This was a gift from a friend, actually. It's the way I met the guy. So he was sitting outside a photography store around here, and I looked over at him and I said, he was buying it from somebody, so I looked over him, I said, hey, is that a Fluke 87.5? And we got chatting and we stayed very good friends from then on, and yeah. Hi, Aiden. So this is basically the industry standard multimeter for me. It's so good. The battery lasts a long time. It's very responsive. It's very accurate and very stable. I've never had any issues with it, and I don't think I will, because they're just built like tanks. And I don't care how many people say that, oh, the Bryman is 10 times cheaper and 10 times better. Yeah, well, I don't think you'll be able to retire with the same Bryman as you start out with. But I certainly think I'm going to retire before this Fluke does. And yeah, this is an heirloom piece, an heirloom quality instrument, and anybody who says different has never actually owned one. So 87.5, another one of my favorite things. Reaching for examples, but what? You don't have a GEiger counter? So this is a Pripyat GEiger counter that a friend of mine bought for me from Ukraine. He is from Ukraine, and he's doing his PhD in Switzerland because he's a very, very smart guy. He also builds guitar amplifiers, and I'm gonna try and link some examples of his. Um, this is a twin SBM20 Geiger counter, and it also measures particle flux for beta. So if you take the shield off, it measures particle flux. The battery is, I think the battery on it is a bit low, but yeah, it worked flawlessly all the time. So you can have beta or gamma in Sieverts or Röntgen, and you can have particle flux and something else, I don't know what. So I think this is specific activity for strontium 90. And this is rain. This is vremia, means rain, means time, and this is range. So the range of the reading, basically. You can find these for about 60 bucks usually. I wouldn't pay any more than that for one. They're very good. The only thing that goes bad on them is the display. So it's a pretty bad quality LCD display, and it doesn't really hold up. If it gets any moisture, the liquid drips out and you're left with just the crystals. It's a very bad joke, but you understand what I mean. It gets all smushy and the polarizer breaks down, and yeah. This is by far the best portable Geiger counter that I have and that I've ever had. I also had a Gamma Scout, but that's just a piece of plastic rubbish. And the SBM20 tubes it's got inside are really, really famous and very... They used to be very readily available. I don't know what happened, but a few years back, like, the market just exploded for these things, and from a couple of euros a piece, they're up there in the 20 euros a piece now. So whenever I find any at the flea market, I just buy them so I have spares for it. Let's think of another favorite thing. First of all, you remember that photodiode I found a while back on that circuit board? That photodiode was the biggest piece of single component silicon that I had till then. This is the one that I found a few weeks back, and look at the size of it. It's just absolutely enormous. So it's almost 25 millimeters across. The longest dimension is 35 millimeters. So I think these were made on Romanian-made 2-inch wafers. So imagine that the wafer was 50 millimeters and you'd get basically one component per wafer. And this actually works. It was badly chipped, and the epoxy was, I think somebody attacked it with a soldering iron or something like that. But I chucked the thing in the chuck of my cordless drill, and I polished it with some increasingly fine grit sandpaper, and the only things I couldn't get rid of are these concentric scratches in the center. I think with a bit more polishing I might be able to get rid of those as well. So yeah, a giant piece of silicon, just beautiful. And under bright light it actually puts out like almost half a volt and a couple hundred microamps, which is, yeah, it's a small solar panel. Another of my favorite things, let me get more teaching assistant, I don't know what to call it, paraphernalia. Be right back. Right, so I did find another couple of things. First of all is this thing. It's I think it's a DSP32 made by AT&T Bell. It came from the Wiltern spectrum analyzer mainframe, vector analyzer mainframe that you didn't see me taking apart because, yeah, it wasn't really worth it. But it's just a beautiful package, and I'm debating whether I should attack this solder joint here with extreme prejudice so we can take a look at the silicon inside. Let me give it a shot, and if I succeed, I'll be right back. If not, I'll show you something else. Apologies, it didn't want to come out. My next favorite thing is vacuum tubes, from the smallest to the medium sized to, slightly larger ones. And oh, wait. And to the really, really eeny-weeny tiny ones. So this is a new Vister. It's a vacuum tube in the same general footprint of an early transistor. These were made by Philips in Germany, and they're triodes. So they're basically like a JFET with a pilot light, as they said. These vacuum tubes are from that sampling scope that I told you about. This one is from that Hewlett-Packard signal generator. I actually have a full set of spare tubes for it. And these are actually Russian beam pentodes. They are... actually, this one isn't a beam pentode. Excuse me. This is a regular pentode. Beam pentodes look a bit different, or rod pentodes. These are, I don't think I have any. Wait, I have to show these to you. Right, so flea market finds bonanza here. So this is a regular, I think this is a regular pentode, so, but just in a very small form factor. This is a beam tetrode. They aren't beam pentodes, they're beam tetrodes. Rod tetrodes, more correctly, because they're made in rods inside. So the active elements inside the anode, cathode, and the grids are shaped as rods, and they rely on electrostatic focusing to control and modulate the anode current from the grid, rather than basically that polarization. So the control grid actually focuses or defocuses a beam path from the cathode to the anode. These were actually very good. They were better than germanium transistors when they first came out, and they were made in the hundreds of millions, I think. There were even models that were meant to be fired in smart ammunition, guided ammunition, and they had to resist only for like 60 seconds, so their filament rating lifetime was very short, but their performance was amazing. So vacuum tubes are far better than most people actually know. I mean, they're basically unsusceptible to ESD. They're completely radiation proof and stuff like that, but they're slower than transistors have become. I have quite an assortment of these vacuum tubes, which I found from the flea market, and a really cool one, which I found recently, still at the flea market, is this one. This is in 5886. It's made by HiVac in England. This is a Electrometer pentode. It can run as a triode as well as any pentode, but this is an Electrometer pentode. This is the grid, and you can see it's the furthest pin apart because the leakage, basically. This one almost didn't survive being extracted from whatever it was extracted from because, ham-fisted people. And it's extremely fragile. It's very, very beautiful. It's gorgeously made. You can see the internal structure completely. So in the middle we have the cathode, which runs the filament, which runs at around 1 volt and something along the lines of 20, 30, 40, 50 milliamps, something like that. Then we have the control grid and anode and suppressor grid and stuff like that. And this is basically the equivalent of something like a very low noise, high JFET. JFETs are also very high impedance, so the gate resistance is almost infinite ideally. But this is a vacuum tube. And what did this vacuum tube do? Well, if you look at these other things that I found associated with it, You can see these are Victorine, from the Victorine that made the CDV 700 series of Geiger counters. So a Victorine 10 mega ohm resistor and a glass tube. And I have 10 mega ohms, I have 10,000 mega ohms. So this is 10 giga ohms. And I also have 100 mega ohms and 1 giga ohm. I teased this board before. This is one of the coolest operational amplifiers. I'm going to set it aside and finish talking about these. These, I assume, they were extracted not very gently from a Keithley 400 series electrometer because they correspond almost exactly to what was initially in there. Okay, looks like I have all 5 ranges. So I'm pretty sure that this tube in combination with these resistors was the main transimpedance amplifier in that electrometer. And yeah, you should have seen the look on my face when I saw these and thought, DIY electrometer. Well, there's an easier way. You just get yourself some PCBs made following the ADA 4530 evaluation board. This is a kick-ass operational amplifier made by Analog Devices. It's an electrometer input analog operational amplifier, and it's running in a transimpedance configuration right now. I'm not going to go into very much detail. This board is, I think if you buy this board separately from Analog Devices, it's something like $1,000 because it's made on Rogers PCB to have very low dielectric loss and leakage and stuff like that. You can see the guide traces everywhere, and extra cleanliness shields to evaluate the performance of this amazing operational amplifier. So Analog Devices sells you this board entirely, but you can also just download the files and have some boards made, and I did, and I had some fun with this. And yeah, I got basically almost a perfect 1 volt per nanoamp transimpedance amplifier. So this is a 1 giga ohm resistor. So 1 giga ohm resistor, 10 to the 9th ohm with 10 to the minus 9th amps equals 1 volt. So if you don't know how this circuit works, I'm going to get some paper and draw a quick DaveCAD schematic. Be right back. So apologies for the sort of ragged piece of paper I found. So we have an operational amplifier with the negative input and the positive input. We tie the positive input to the ground, We supply it with plus V and minus V. And then we put a massive resistor in the feedback loop and say this is 1 giga ohms, right? As I used it. And then this becomes your electrometer input, because electrometers work like this. When a current flows into the input of the operational amplifier, this input has exceedingly low bias currents, below femtoamps in this case. I don't remember exactly what was the bias current for this op-amp in particular. I can remember that for this tube, the bias current for the grid, for the control grid, was 5 femtoamps. So the current is not going to flow in here, so it's got to go somewhere, right? So what happens is it flows across this resistor and goes into the output of the operational amplifier, which starts pulling the output low towards whatever it takes to get this node to be at ground. Because the second law of operational amplifier says that any op-amp in a feedback loop will have 0 voltage difference between its inputs. So if I feed 1 nanoamp in here, 1 nanoamp across 1 giga ohm, 1 nanoamp is going to drift back into here, then we'll have negative 1 volt at the output. So this is basically how a electrometer works. This is how my 617 works. This is how most electrometers work these days. And the very important parameters in an electrometer are the temperature coefficient of the op-amp, the resistor, and most importantly, the voltage coefficient of resistance of these resistors. Usually, and this is the crux in this kind of resistor, these are older. I think these are carbon film. They're not very good resistors because they have a very, very large coefficient of resistance with voltage. I will do an entire video about this circuit here, and I'll show you the thing running on the source meters, and but I don't want to get into too much detail here. Suffice it to say that this resistor has a value of 10 gigaohms only at a few volts. If you bias it with higher voltage, even though you don't exceed its power rating, its voltage coefficient of resistance is so large that its resistance changes. And that happens due to various things like piezoelectrics and other material sciences. Another cool thing which comes in glass is quartz crystals. And I talked about quartz crystals in a previous flea market finds, I think. I even cracked one open, but for this one we don't even need to crack it open because you can see the quartz with gold plating on each side and a solder joint on the gold, and this is a 153 kilohertz quartz filter. It's made in Romania. It's not vacuumed, or at least I don't think so. This might be ceramic. But anyway, this is a pretty little quartz crystal. And I tested it and it's pretty spot on 153 kilohertz. I think it was something like an intermediate frequency for RF transceiver or something like that. And yeah, this is one of the vacuum tubes. This is actually a pentode. Remember that I showed you a vacuum tube operational amplifier? Well, this is one of the 3 tubes it's got inside. It's got one of these, and one of these, I think. This is a twin triode. This is a pentode, and this is another pentode. So if I've done my math correct, a twin triode should be enough for a differential amplifier, and 2 pentodes for a very large amount of open loop gain. And we have an operational amplifier. So yeah, that was a dual op amp, and I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I still haven't found the pinouts for it, because otherwise I would have tried to build something like a VN bridge oscillator with a vacuum tube amplifier, operational amplifier. That would have been really cool. The sad thing is that the bandwidth of these things in that operational amplifier is very, very low. I think it's about 100-ish kilohertz or something, so maybe a low frequency oscillator. And another thing that's in glass and it's very cute, that comes in glass and is very cute, is a neon bulb. So these are neon discharge lamps. I'm sure you know them, and I'm sure you know what they're useful for, but I still find them cute, and they're actually quite pretty when they light up. Right, let me think of more things to show you, and I'll be right back. Right, so this didn't take me very long because this is one of the most amazing things that you can get as an electronics engineer. It's extremely useful, and what it is I think they called it a Roadrunner. So back in the day, when you tried to make prototypes and didn't want to use like ferric chloride to etch a board, you could just use this and it would fit through something like a ballpoint pen, basically, with a tip, and you would solder the tip to a terminal and drag it to where you need it and solder it and snipped it, And the cool thing about this, and one of the many warnings on the label, is that these are these have a sort of enamel that can be stripped off with the soldering iron. So I think I'm gonna try and use my two-handed technique to demonstrate this. I hope you can see that. If not, I'll do my best. Oh yeah, I can see that. Right. So, oh, that turned out even better than I expected. So, the heat of the soldering iron is enough to strip the enamel coating off of this wire, and it's very good to do bodges on boards like I showed you on this board in the previous video. I mixed around the inputs on that 1193 and I cut the traces to it, and I just used some of this easy stripping enamel coated wire to correct it. So yeah, this is a great thing to have. Really excellent. Okay, I think everybody knows that I like scalpels and medical tools, but another overlooked aspect of electronics is tweezers. And I decided to splurge at some point, and I got this nice set of Avens. I can't afford the Bernsteins yet. Maybe I'll start a Patreon. These are very, very nice tweezers. I'm not sponsored by them by any chance, but they're made in Pakistan, I think. And yeah, they're stainless steel. They're truly non-magnetic, because I had the problem with ordering non-magnetic tweezers, and well, I made a fool of myself. They're magnetic as well, but anyway, this is very slightly magnetic, because this is a pretty good magnet. So they're not magnetic enough to get stuck to components. They're very sharp, and the points on them land very well onto one another. And compared to Wera, Aram, or Bernstein or something like that, these were only $60 for the entire set. I think a Bernstein set of tweezers is around 200. So not a bad price. And speaking of not a bad price, well, the Pico Finish set of, this isn't a Pico Finish, these are Pico Finish. You can find these at Home Depot or Hornbach in Europe for around $15 for a set of, I remember, I think like 6. And these are also like $15 for the fancy set of ErgoStar metric. And you can also find the Imperial version. I didn't find the Imperial version of the ErgoStar, so I had to settle for these, which are, I think, rebranded by Hornbach or Home Depot from a manufacturer. I think the manufacturer of these tools is the same manufacturer that makes the Proxon hand tools, because they're deceptively similar. These are the Imperial ones, which I wish I didn't have to use or didn't need, but American tools use Imperial, and British tools use Imperial screws and fasteners. So instead of trying to make one of these fit and stripping the threads or stripping the screw or the screw head or whatever, get yourself a set of Imperial if you're in Europe, and get yourself a set of metric if you're in America, although you probably already have a set of metric things, because nobody uses Imperial apart from a few countries, which I won't name. Right, you know that I love calculators. I'm not gonna beat that dead horse again. Let me think of another few items to show you, and yeah, I'll be right back. I think you get where I'm going. Toothbrushes are very important for an electronics engineer, both to keep their breath nice and fresh and minty, but also for cleaning this godsend off of boards once you're done with it. with them. So because getting RA flux like this from Amtech, from the actual Amtech, is kind of difficult and expensive. So one of these things originally is like 60 bucks. I usually go to the flea market and buy a tube of this thing, which costs around $1.50. So the only original flux that I still have is this Chip Quick, which is made for their low temperature melting solders. And I keep it especially for that because it works on those bismuth, tin bismuth alloys better than anything else. They have a knack for corroding, and I keep a very generous stock of flux at all times, because the difference between a good person who knows how to solder and a person who doesn't know how to solder is how much flux they use. And toothbrushes, because they're very good at getting into tiny crevices between components. I always like my boards to look presentable. And speaking of presentable, IPA. I also always keep a liter of IPA around. DCM and other solvents like that are kind of dangerous, and methylated spirits and stuff like that are kind of dangerous. They're a lot better and a lot more effective, but IPA is the safest. This thing smells terrible. Acetone smells terrible. DCM smells horrifying, and you should never like even smell DCM, dichloromethane. But you know, it's important to have some technical solvents around. And I also have a bottle of Ballistol all the time because, you know, universal snake oil, it actually works for a lot of things. And let's cut this short, and let me show you 3 more things. Tunnel diodes. This is a blast from the past. So I bought a few sets of tunnel diodes a while back. I don't know if I showed you these or not. These are actually way past their shelf life, and they actually came with the, so 1981 they were made. Original paper with their data sheet in Russian or Ukrainian, I'm not entirely sure. They are, so peak inverse voltage is 0.6 volts, 0.25 volts, VF is 0.6 volts. These are very fragile components, and they actually have an expiration date. I think the expiration date for these things is 12 to 18 months. So these have gone off, and they do work as tunnel diodes. I'm going to insert a graph of what the tunnel diode actually looks like on a source meter, but it's very misleading because you're not really characterizing the diode's characteristic. You're actually just isolating on one of the family of characteristics of that negative differential resistance. So yeah, tunnel diodes, very interesting components. They can be used as switches, oscillators, and everything, but they've gone by the wayside and nobody really uses them. The Philips scope that I showed you actually has both the time base triggered by a tunnel diode and the sampling triggered by a tunnel diode, and every tunnel diode that I've tested inside that thing is completely and utterly dead. So yeah, no way we're gonna repair that thing. And the last thing I wanted to show you was aeronautical switches. So these are made by the Bendix Corporation. This is a rotary switch, and this is a these were part of an automated pilot control unit. I already have taken the liberty of taking this apart, and I actually had 2 of them. First one was just destroy and take apart with extreme prejudice. And these ones I might try and use for something because the switches feel very nice. There's a lovely detent in the middle, and this is very, very lovely. This was for elevation and turnings, left and right. And this was for the mode, so the operation mode of the autopilot. What I like about this switch is that you can see right now it's non-latching at all. but if you'll give me just a moment while I set up a power supply, you'll see that this is a very, very interesting little switch. Be right back. Right, so this is very difficult to film, but you can now see that the switch is mechanically latching into any position that I set it to, and if I release the power, it returns back to its original position, its default position. So why does that happen? Well, inside there's a little cam, and it just clipped off. Inside there's a little cam. Oh, you know what, screw it, we have time. Let me just take it apart and show you what happens. Right, so after a bit of cussing, I finally managed to extricate it again. So, hopefully, focus. You can see there's a spring, a torsion spring, and there is a cam in the side. And that on that cam there's the end of a switch which rides on the cam, and when it releases the switch, it actually contacts the coil of this electromagnetic brake here, and doing that, it locks the shaft in place. So yeah, let me try and carefully turn it on. I'm not entirely sure how I can do this without ruining something inside. And yeah, I did it. Right, so you can see the brake braking right now. And the cam, it's kind of hard to see in there, but you can see if it would focus, yeah. See? Clicks the switch, stops the thing from turning until you overpower it. And this is the resistor that limits the current through that coil. It needs 24 volts to operate. So yeah, this is a pretty cool little switch. It's actually very nicely made, very robust. And I'll release the power again and watch my fingers. And you'll be able to see the brake releasing and the mechanism reverting to its initial position, its default position. So watch out for that. Blink and you'll miss it. Yeah. Right, so I think that about wraps it up for today. I really enjoy making these videos for you guys. I really appreciate the fact that you're watching them. I've actually noticed that YouTube's algorithm enjoys clickbait that more than anything else. So titles with the greatest thing ever seem to perform extraordinarily well, but I won't do clickbait because I really appreciate sincerity and honesty, and I wouldn't want to trick my viewers into thinking that I'm in this for the money or for something else. No, I'm in this to educate and entertain and try and make everybody's day a bit better. Because now, for example, you saw inside the an autopilot switch, and not many people on this world can say that they had the privilege to do that. And I feel privileged that I could do that, and I want to share my privilege with you. And yeah, thank you again for watching, and thank you 1,000 times for 1,000 subscribers, actually 1,043 or something like that. So to each of you, subscriber number 1 to 1,045, thank you very much for subscribing. It means a great deal to me, and I hope to see you soon on the next video, which will be probably next Saturday. And yeah, stay safe and take care of yourselves, and thanks again. See you next time. Bye bye.